So there's another episode of Voices with Raj. Actually, this time it's with Rishabh, and he is an admiring person. Like, my brother told me about him, and after that I've been keeping an eye on his work and what he's been doing. And what struck me is like he's just in his 20s, and what he has built is massive. Like massive. And I don't want to talk more about it. I want Rishabh to talk more about it. So Rishabh, why don't you tell everyone who you are, what do you do, and what's the journey? Like, who's the man behind all this idea which young people look up to?
Well, I think very kind of you to say all of this, but the thing is, like, it's a lot of young people who are doing it, and I'm just the face behind IIMUN, or something that's called India's International Movement to Unite Nations. So this is an organization I started about 8 years ago.
Wow!
And
How old were you? How old?
19.
So you started. Wow.
Right, so I was 18 and a half, I conceptualized it, started when I was 19, struggled just like every other young person who wants to do something different, much like yourself, in the very beginning. And then I think when I was 19, we did our first conference. What happens basically is students get together, so it's an congregation of about 500 to 50,000 young people who come together, and then for about 3 days.
Did you just say like 500 to 50,000? And that you just said it in a way. I'm cutting you here, but because that was so modest, he's just like 500 to 50,000.
But of course, it's young people and the fact that they like something like this. So it's more than you and me. I think it's the fact that they come together to discuss and like to debate different local, national and international issues. So this is what primarily happens on those 3 days, and then speakers such as yourself come in and engage with the students. So this is a 3-day affair that takes place in different parts.
In different parts of. Are you only in India, or it's around the world now?
So again, Touchwood is we started with Bombay, and then now it's gone on to 160 cities in India and in 15 countries across the world.
Wow. 50,000 people, 160 cities, and how many countries again?
15 countries.
15 countries. Like, that's massive. And look at the man.
No, there is please, because the only thing is, like I said, I'm just very fortunate to be the face of it. I've done nothing apart from founding it. The people who actually run it are people who are between 16 to 23, 24.
Wow.
So that's the age bracket that actually does it. And there are 26,000 people who run this entire thing. So I think those are the people who really should take this credit and should be in front of the camera. It's just that we can't fit 26,000 there. So it's me.
But it takes like one man to put all these people together, and I think that's the big job. Like, I would definitely agree that it's the people who are working and have made this organization, but you're the person who have got this people together, and that's kudos to you for that. I mean, that's incredible. But so what I want to know is, how did it happen in 19? Like, did you just come up one day and start like, okay, I want to build some conference, and it's gonna be called like India's Moment?
No, well, I think the thing is, so I studied at two schools, Cathedral and Green Lawns
in
Bombay, and I think a similar program was there in both these institutions. What we were very lucky, as studying in an urban elite school in Bombay, so to say, is that we got this opportunity to go to this university called Harvard, and we had a program in Harvard which was a similar program. But what happened out there is they were wearing Western formals. We were discussing Republicans versus Democrats, and we were learning international stuff. But it was a very Western oriented platform, so to say, and I think growing up as a generation, you and me prefer more McDonald's and less dal rice, and also talk more about Donald Trump in comparison to our local member of parliament.
True.
So the idea was that once I went there and I came back, I kind of realized that there is something like this that's not present in India, and I think with the population which is predominantly young, and with about 600 million people who are below 25, I think the next generation in India should not just know about the West, but should also know about their own country. And I think India is the only country that's not invaded any other country, and I think we've given the world yoga and Mahatma Gandhi ji and so much. So I think world over, students should learn more about India as well, not just learn about Republicans and Democrats. So that's the idea.
That's the vision, dude. Like, that's something, like, it just shook me right now, and then it's kind of inspiring. Like, at the age of 19, you were thinking about all these things. Like, this was a thought when you started, or it has just transformed into this thought, or you started with something else?
No, I can't be honest that I knew all of this when I started saying that, this is the impact it could make, because I think anybody would be foolish in order to start and say that, I'm going to make this into a $1 billion company
True.
or something of the sort, or a non-profit or whatever it is. But with impacting 10,000 people or 20,000 people, either ways, whatever you choose, I don't think when you start that time you know that what's eventually what you can reach. I think over a period of time, I think by 2013-14, once it was spread out in different cities and a few countries, at that point in time I kind of realized that a kid in Brazil, if you tell the kid in Brazil saying, let's learn today about Swami Vivekananda, he's not going to be averse to it because he's 14. If he was 34, he wouldn't really care about who Swami Vivekananda
True.
is. But when he's 13 and 14, he'll at least listen to you. I'm not as good looking as you are, but the better looking people who come in and smarter people who come in and talk to these people who are 13, 14, 15, 16, and then they debate with each other. So that today you'll be happy to know and happy to share is that in Brazil, when we do a conference in Sao Paulo or when we do something in Woods in Poland, their students are learning about Vivekananda, BJP versus Congress, and of course world affairs, and then practicing yoga in the evenings. And then you have a speaker like yourself, like I said, who comes in and speaks to the children per se. So that's what it is.
I'm impressed. Like I'm really impressed, because this goes beyond about like what we have read about you or what we know about you, because this is something which I think only a person who would meet you can get to know, right? So the vision, like how somebody in Brazil, like the thought process, technically, like you can impact the young minds, not the elder minds, and how you are changing this entire scenario and giving world what India is. This is incredible.
Because, sorry, and what, just to add to it, is because you can't really change the mindset of a person who's today 45 and who thinks of India in a particular way.
True.
So if somebody thinks that India is a land full of snake charmers, then they already think it, and it's very difficult to change it if you're 40 and above or 35 and above. But when you're talking about 14, they don't have any idea of India.
Yeah.
And tomorrow this 14-year-old is going to become the next Brazilian president or the next Donald Trump. And you can't change the Donald Trump's perception about many, I think, as much as the Republicans and Democrats try.
Yeah.
But you can shape the mindset of the next Donald Trump.
True, that's true. That's fair enough. Like that's true. So what I want to know is, you were 19, you started with this grand vision, like how you're going to have a similar kind of conference, similar kind of program where you're going to talk about Eastern affairs more than Indian affairs more than the Western world. So this was the only idea, and like how did you put together? Like now that there was an idea, you're 19, I'm pretty sure like the financial crunch would be there, putting out so many people would be there, and then there would be this issue of influence, like how do we fill the room, how do we get the people? So how did you how did you overcome all that? How did you put together, like in short?
Well, I think just like any normal person would, you'd go knocking to schools and colleges to ask them, saying that would there be students who would be interested in a program like this. And just a very small incident where I went to a particular institution, name I won't take, but I went to a particular institution and they said, why should we send students to a program which has never happened before? And I think that's for anybody who's done something on their own, the initial phase of...
True.
So I told the principal there, saying that you must give young people a chance, and she said, yeah, but my students are from this very urban elite school in Bombay. And I said, we already participate in these programs internationally. Why should they participate in yours? She was somewhat dismissive and said that so let's give it a skip this year. And I think that happened to us in 9 out of 10 schools in Bombay, and I won't lie. It was that 1 out of 10 that actually put faith in us and said that we'll give it a shot, let's see what it is. And then that faith that needs to be built on slowly and gradually, because I think as another young person who's achieved so much, you'd agree that for somebody like me who's not achieved as much, yes, but for whatever little that we can do, we need to build on the faith that people have shown in us.
True.
And only then, one after the other, will things work. So yeah.
So it started with like 10 schools and you ended up getting only one.
Yeah. Always.
It's always like that. So you were like, the first model was going to school, like, or still it is?
Well, it was going to school, getting students from every school in one venue. Okay. And then...
And like, would you do it in the school, or you would choose a venue outside the school?
In places that we could, like say Bombay, we could do it outside. But in all the 160 cities that we now operate in, we don't necessarily do it in places outside. It depends upon. So if there is a school that's large enough, then probably we do it in a school in itself.
So, but when you started, you were doing outside the school.
Yes, even now we're in some of our bigger cities. It's always better to choose a neutral venue.
Yeah.
It's because if you do it in a school, then sometimes schools don't like other schools
don't like it.
So that's why in some cases which are bigger cities we choose external venues.
So when you started, like you chose an external venue, I'm pretty sure you would have got the seat fund. Like how do you organize the funds to book that event? Like what was the story? Because many people, like many young people who wants to start, we have, let's say I'm a young person and I don't know, like I don't have any background. I'm just 19. I have this idea of changing the world with whatever little I can. And I don't have the money to put it together. What do I do? Like what you did?
Well, in my case, again, I've been fortunate that so I used to play chess before, and I represented the state and the country in different things.
Wow.
And I think I made a little bit of a winning from there, and I think that money definitely did help in the initial
phase.
So to that end, your savings, and therefore remember that small little piggy bank that you got when you were 8 or 9 and you put in the rupee out there and you saved it. I think those savings initially will definitely help. Of course, if the idea, because this idea is something that is a confidence based idea and this is not a company, so it didn't require that kind of a capital investment also.
True.
And at the same point in time, however, for entrepreneurs per se, I would be the wrong person to give a piece of advice, because I think in our case, because it's not an entrepreneurship based venture as such, it does not require that kind of capital investment.
True.
Therefore, it was much easier for somebody who's an entrepreneur who needs say $1 million to start, or like 100,000 to start, US dollars to start. I think for such people it would be a more difficult proposition in comparison to what
you guys did,
which was a more social initiative, so to say.
True. And also, does it help, like since it was a conference event kind of thing, so you would ask people for the money first?
So a student obviously pays you some money for the event.
So do they pay the entire money in the start before the event, or like it's the partial payment? Like how do you get it?
But the funding from students would never suffice for
the entire program.
So that's like 30%, and remaining 70% is sponsors. So actually the story, if at all, which would resonate with somebody who's a startup entrepreneur, is that how do you get your initial sponsorship or your initial funding?
Yeah.
And to that end, I took a blank slide, and it's like it's as good as taking a blank slide and going to an industrialist or anybody and just asking them, saying, put faith in this blank slide and why don't you fund IIMUN? To that end, of course, in the first year and the second year, we've had to have people who basically put logo visibility, or who exchange logo visibility for branding and so on and so forth in the first year and the second year.
Okay.
And that's how we raised
sponsorship,
sponsorship, so to say. And then that sponsorship was 70% and the student contribution was 30%. Because in a city like Port Blair, when we do a conference, a student can't pay money.
True.
And we wouldn't want them to pay the money as well. So there we charge like a fee of 1 rupee. But even if you put together 1,000 students in Port Blair, that's yet 1,000 bucks, which is not even the cost of transporting yourself from here to Port Blair.
True.
So the idea is, in places like that, or in places like Leh Ladakh, in a place like Baramulla, which is next to Srinagar on the India-Pakistan border, or a place like Syria, the concept and the idea is not to go there and charge them money, but to be able to teach them the message of peace, because it's in these kind of places that message of peace and the teachings of people like Vivekananda need to be spread more than a Bombay and Sao Paulo and in Poland. Those are the fancy places that you and me would love to visit, but these are the places that
there's a need of the hour at the moment. Yeah,
absolutely.
Wow. So like this was initial fundings included, like you went to sponsors, and all that time you were just 19. So how did that expand? Like now that we know, like this is how you started, this was the vision, and how many people did you get in your first conference?
So there were about 1,000, 1,200 people.
Wow, that's pretty good start, okay? Like for if someone who's doing first event and getting 1,000 people, I'm pretty sure that's not much for you now, but like it's a good start for anyone who's getting into the event industry. Like, what do you think? So, do you think like you're into social entrepreneurship or you're into event industry? Like, what kind of industry are you in? Like, what do you consider yourself to be in?
Well, honestly, it's moved away from even social entrepreneurship. It's moved into a completely social venture, because the idea of doing IIMUN was never to make it $1 billion company or something of the sort. I think the idea was to sensitize people to the idea of India, and more than just the idea of India, to the message of global peace. And like I said, like when I see a kid in Indore learning about peace, it's great. Or in Mumbai, it's very nice. But when you go to Baramulla, and a small incident actually of Srinagar, when we were doing the conference, and the governor of J&K was the chief guest. There was security right from the main entrance to the venue, and there were about 7 layers of security because it was just at the border. And the students out there were radicalized to believe that India is just doing everything wrong to them. So when I started my speech, I said, and Virat Kohli and Ranbir Kapoor are popular people in the country. So I said, how many of you like Virat and Ranbir? And if this video ever reaches them, and then they must visit Baramulla for no other reason, but there was no response. I did not receive any response from about a gathering of 400-500 people, which has come then in some media outlets in Jammu and Kashmir. Then I went on to say, so how many of you like Shahid Afridi? And everyone in unanimity said yes. And I don't not like the fact that they like Shahid Afridi so much, but also the fact that they're living in their own country and do not know anything about Indian cricket, or like anybody in Indian cricket, or for that matter in Bollywood, etc. And that's where I gave a speech for about more than my stipulated time, for about 45 minutes. And at the end of it, I said Jai Hind, and people did reciprocate and say Jai Hind. And when I came back down, the governor whispered in my ear and said, which I'm happy to say on record now, and he said that, don't you care for your life? You said Jai Hind twice in your speech. You spoke about India so passionately, you're not concerned that somebody would pull out a gun and shoot you. So I said, these are 13, 14-year-olds. And if they don't know about India, then what am I doing in Baramulla? What am I doing in Srinagar per se? Then he very kindly offered me to stay at the Raj Bhavan, and he said that you should stay at my house, don't stay anywhere else. And I said, no, it's fine. This is my country as much as it's theirs, and so that's the idea, that the 13, 14, 15, 16 should understand more about the message of peace, and not just their country, but the message of peace, and the fact that everything cannot be solved by violence. Today, kids in Srinagar and in the northeast are getting radicalized, in Syria getting radicalized, and you have the problem of child soldiers, which we discuss in the UN. But then who's going out there and educating the kids in Africa or in Syria or in Srinagar? And so one of the things that we've done in Srinagar with 60 schools is done this program free of cost, where we do it in the 60 schools through the year. So so the idea is that the message of peace should be spread across. So it's not, the industry, or so from social entrepreneurship, it's moved into purely social. But then I think that's what is needed.
Like I'm mesmerized at the moment. Like the way you were talking, and it was all about Baramulla and how you were doing, how you. I'm out of words, because the kind of thing you're doing, like, don't you care about your life? It's the question which I want to ask you as well. I mean, like, it takes a lot of courage, though. I get the vision, I get everything. I really want to do something like what you're doing. I want to spread that message. I want to have an impact. But what's fascinating to me is the courage and how passionate you are with your work, because it takes a lot of courage to passionately follow your work. I mean, what you're doing. So I can talk a lot about how passionate I am about whatever I'm doing. But when it's come to situations like these, where it's on my life, I would definitely take a back step. And what you did was commendable. And what you've been doing, the government asked me, I'm still thinking about that. Don't you care about your life? And that's so true.
Well, I think somebody more than that. I think it's not just me, but I think the people who do IIMUN who are 16 to 23. So it's very fancy and very nice when we get people from different fields to come in and speak in a Mumbai, Delhi, UN, Poland, etc. And all these safe, very nice places. But I think that's one side of it, which is great to sensitize students in these kind of places to the message of peace and to India. But also the real work is where you go to these places like Srinagar and like Syria, and you put together conferences out there. So my personal next project is the one in Damascus, which is where we're putting together something, and then I want to do something in Aleppo, in Syria, wherein and there if you teach somebody who's 14 saying don't pick up this weapon, through that speech and through that gathering and through the 3-day discourse, I think that changes lives much more in comparison to sitting in Cathedral or Green Lawns and debating.
Wow. So now I want to know more about this side. So you told me like you've been to places like Baramulla. Have you been to Syria before?
To Syria, I've not been, but the team's been.
Team's been there.
To do like a small check in terms of security and all of that, and I think it's fine.
Okay. So what are the places, like, can you name like 5 places which was really tough for you to, like, where you thought, okay, should I go or not go? Any like 5 places where you've...
The Northeast is another place. So I think in all of our states across the Northeast, and people must visit, they kind of realize that they are completely out of sync with what India is.
Yeah. I know yesterday I was talking to this guy, he was from North India as well, and he happened to be my hairdresser, and he's from Nagaland, and he was telling me about all these things, like, so, because I told him that I'm going to speak about certain things, and then he told me what he shared is like, there people think India is abroad.
Correct.
Like India is a different country.
Correct.
Like we don't belong to that country.
Correct.
And what we have, we think, like you guys think that there's Gujarati, there's Marathi, but in us, in Nagaland, there are only 16 tribes, and we have been taught, and we just know the system works in that way, that we care about the 16 tribes.
Correct.
We don't know what the other part of India is doing.
Correct.
And I think the way he has been educated was like the India doesn't support them. So he has this so much rage towards the country.
And the thing is that it should be a world without borders, definitely. But first, at least the identification, like you identify yourself as a global citizen, but also as an Indian, and somebody from Nagaland is not able to do both.
Yeah.
And the message of IIMUN is in order to make sure that a person is able to identify with their country. So when we go to Poland, we just don't preach about India, but also tell them about their Polish roots. Or when we go to Brazil, we tell students about the Brazilian roots. And the idea is for them to identify with their own country and the world as one. Learning more, of course, about India. So places that are difficult, the Northeast, Port Blair was very, very difficult. A couple of countries in Africa were a challenge. We're doing something, so just next to Egypt, on the border of Egypt, we were doing something, and again that was a challenge. So I think there have been quite a few places.
You've been to cities in Africa, Egypt, and then how was Brazil for you? Was it just fine, or did you go to some...
No, I didn't visit, so I didn't have the good fortune of... I don't visit most of these places. Like
so any incident you would like to share where you saw something and like, okay, whatever I'm doing is the right thing?
Well, so I was, again, it's
so
primarily India that I've traveled.
Just like one incident which you shared about this, how you... Srinagar. Like the Baramulla where you said Jai Hind twice. Like some incident which you thought, like, after doing it, you thought, okay, I could have never done that if it was not about spreading the message of peace, or something which made you realize, okay, whatever I'm doing is the right thing to do, and I'm going to keep doing it completely. So any incident which happened with you in any of these places, or where you have traveled, or
See, the video is going to go out to people who are going to be watching this on Instagram and on Facebook and so on and so forth, and definitely not in Baramulla in Srinagar. But therefore I will give you such one incident where we did something in the UN headquarters in New York, wherein on the 15th of August we were celebrating the Independence Day, and we had students from world over who were present. And the students from world over, of course, from different parts, but also from India, from the Northeast, etc. We'd taken about 45 students from Mizoram to this conference in New York. And I remember a very funny incident. There's this gentleman by the name Vikas Khanna, who is a very popular chef.
Yeah, I know.
A celebrity chef, and he was there, and he was speaking, and then there were these students from the northeast who were sitting from northeast of India, who were sitting on the very end. And people from the northeast are very quiet and they're very gentle people. I'm sure you just interacted with your hairdresser, so they're not, even when they're angry or when they're dissatisfied, they're not voicing it out and shouting on top of their voices. So they're very patiently sitting there, but you can make out saying that they're not interested in what's happening. And I was there, but more than me, there was this team that was more proactive, and I must take the name of a few of them. There's this girl called Kashmi who was standing out there, and she said, Rishabh, these guys don't seem to be interested in what's happening, and they're losing track of proceedings. So I said, why don't you go and talk to them? And she went and she spoke to these kids from the northeast, and they said, we like it, but we don't, we're not understanding much, and we're not following much. And you're 14, you're from Mizoram. You were sitting in New York and you're listening to Vikas Khanna, and if you account for the jet lag, and you're 14, you're obviously not going to be interested in the proceedings. So she said, so she said, why don't you do one thing? Why don't you come join us for food? And she took them out, the entire team of 45. So it was an entire room, and so 45 people just disappear, and Vikas Khanna is talking, and we took them to a place where Vikas Khanna's restaurant was kind enough in order to provide some food. And they had that sumptuous food. They said, this is lovely. And then we said, this is made by the gentleman who is just speaking. And she said, wow, this is amazing. Can we go and meet him? So Kashmi said, in her mind, and then she later on told me saying, he's the same guy who was speaking, you could hear. And then we took them out there, and we made them interact with Vikas Khanna. He was very happy, so were they. Long story cut short, I think at that juncture we kind of realized that, and you asked me a question in terms of any particular incident that you take back, and those 45 kids, when they finished with their program in the UN and when they came back to Mizoram and then they published it in their newspapers and so on and so forth, they remember New York for as much as for everything that happened in the UN, but also for the fact that they had that food and then interacted with Vikas Khanna. And the idea is that, so we combine, so when these conferences happen, it's not just the conference per se, but even the food that they're eating. So, for example, if you were to go to Brazil, the food that you'd be eating would be Brazilian cuisine plus Indian cuisine. So it's the message of global peace. And somebody asked me saying, how do you get Vikas Khanna to come in and speak at a conference for global peace? Well, I think one of the things that binds the world is the cup of coffee or the food that you are having. So I think utilizing different mediums, and therefore when you see IIMUN, that time it seems like, why do you have song and dance? Like in a conference for peace, how do you have song and dance? But I think song and dance are the greatest two things that bind the world when it comes to peace.
Put people in put people in symphony together, right? True.
Food, song, dance, all of these things are utilized in order. So this is a very different tangent to looking at things. But then food was the one that combined and got the students to unite, so to say. And then they started becoming more and more proactive to what the speaker and to what was the proceeding
happening. Wow. So this is one incident, like how you were there to celebrate Independence Day and talking about world peace, but you realized, like the kids realized about the food.
The food is the thing that they care about. The Independence Day, of course they care about the UN, of course they care about Vikas Khanna, but for them what is the most important thing is the food. Kids from the Northeast were eating food which was not traditionally served in the Northeast, but made by Vikas Khanna for us on that occasion, and that's the same thing that's that's the same thing that actually combined them. Made it possible.
Wow. So you told me, like in conversation which happened before camera, you told me about this thing, like you were an introvert and then you became an extrovert, right? Are you one, or are you still an introvert?
You tell me.
Like, I think you're an extrovert. You're a very outspoken person. So I think you have done a good job. I can't sense that you were an introvert at all. So how do you overcome that? Do you think, like, was there any incident in your childhood, like something happened which shaped you as an extrovert person? Like, how?
So I think, and this is something that I've shared previously as well, tried to document it as well, wherein I think for any introverts who's watching this, and I think that's the core message that, for example, if you were to choose one, the core message for, because growing up as a teenager, I think, I don't know about you, but I think 90% of the people that I meet, young people, they find it very difficult when you are 10, 11, 12 and 13 to break out of that shell. You're anyway experiencing thousands of things at between 10 to 17, 18, and communication is one of the biggest issues I think young people have. So for any introvert, and what happened in my case is I was in school and I was in history class, and history was my least favorite subject. So I used to always sit on the last bench of class, and I used to automatically doze off whenever it was history class. So it was very difficult for my teachers to understand how did they manage to give this boy admission. But on one afternoon, and of course we didn't have an air-conditioned school, one afternoon it was very hot, humid, I had a lot of food, I was a very fat kid, and I had a lot of food, and but then again, went off to sleep, dozed off in the afternoon. The teacher came, woke me up. She said, Rishabh, this is the 10th time that I've caught you sleeping in class. So I'm really sorry, ma'am, and you need to say something. So I said, and I thought I was smart. So I said, ma'am, I've got temperature. Now this teacher was smarter, so she checked and she realized that I don't have temperature. I said, and there was no stand-up comedy back in the day, at least in India. And I said, ma'am, there are two types of temperature, internal and external. Class started laughing. She got livid. She said, so you have internal temperature? I said, of course, ma'am. She called me up front, and then she said, so I'm going to give you instead of a punishment, I'm going to give you an opportunity. That opportunity was the punishment, and the punishment was that she selected me for this competition in a school called DPS Arkipuram in New Delhi, which back then in 2000s, in the first half of 2000, was very popular for debating. Yet is, but back then even more so. And we went to this institution, and they gave me a country to represent in a similar context. And they gave me a topic, and I didn't know anything about the country. I didn't know anything about the topic. The teacher said you need to speak in front of 30 people. So I said that's the worst thing to possibly have happened to me on planet Earth, because I could not speak in front of people. So I sat on the last bench. You get a piece of paper on which your name is written. So I took that piece of paper and put it on the chair, and I sat down on the chair. The name of your country is written on that. One after the other, students were called out, and I didn't know what to say any which way, right? So I'd mugged up a speech, like I written down on paper, and I prepared it. The judge called for me, and said, delegate representing the country, can you please come up? Nobody came up. So it happened, he called twice, and yet nobody came up. I have this over-smart kid in class, always. That over-smart kid was sitting right next to me. So he said, dude, what country are you? So I said, I'm the country that he's calling out. So this over-smart kid said, we found the guy who's actually supposed to be speaking. The judge called me up front. I'm tiny, fat guy with a larger coat, oversized coat, and I'm standing there, and he says, why don't you speak? Started speaking, and everybody in the room, and it wasn't 30, there were 300 people in that room. 300 people, somebody started standing up, somebody stood up and said that, he doesn't know what he's saying, and I didn't know what I was saying. And then there was this procedure of debate that you need to follow, and I didn't know anything like that existed. So all of these guys started standing up and making fun, and I was really tiny. I was in school. I was not very brave, so I ran outside crying to my teacher and said, I don't want to do this ever again. Teacher called up my mother and said, this is what's happened. My mother, being an overprotective parent, like every parent, said, please send him back home. The teacher called up the principal. The principal said, if he comes back home, he'll get the biggest certificate of his life. It's called the leaving certificate. So I had no option, but I had to go back inside the next day, and I sat the next day. The judge called me up and he said, why don't you speak again? To my mind, I was like, the 299 other kids, why don't you pick on any one of them? And he called me up and he said, saying, why don't you speak about something you like? Because I know you don't know anything about the topic. So in my mind, I thanked God for sending somebody who understood that I didn't know anything about the topic. And he said, why don't you speak about cricket or football, anything that you like? So I said, I love cricket. I said, who's your favorite cricketer? So I said, Rahul Dravid is somebody I hugely admire. So he said, why don't you speak about Rahul Dravid? So I spoke about Dravid for a bit, and I was talking to him just like you, and was not looking at everybody else. So I had a very nice conversation about Rahul Dravid
with the guy.
With one-on-one. And then he said, now look at everybody else and then speak. And that's the problem with an introvert or somebody who's not good at communication, is that when we look at people and then when we speak, at that juncture we're very nervous because you're looking into somebody's eyes. One-on-one, I think. So as a young person growing up, I think that's the biggest challenge, saying that, when you look at people into their eyes and then speak. And so then he said, don't look at everybody. Look at the end of the room and just focus on that big, there was a big grandfather clock. 16th century clocks. So just look at that clock and speak. So I spoke for 30 seconds. I think it was the worst speech ever. I think if Rahul Dravid was there, he would have committed suicide. But at the end of that speech, the teacher was standing behind the judge. She whispered something in the ear of the judge. The judge stood up, and the judge is much like the principal of the school. So he stood up and he started clapping. Now, when the principal stands up,
everybody technically stands up.
Has to stand up. And as a kid growing up in school, it didn't catch my fancy that 300 students stood up and started clapping. But what definitely caught my fancy and what I really liked is the guy who made fun of me, who was sitting next to me, who said, we found the oversmart kid. So that oversmart kid also had to stand up because the principal equivalent is standing up, and he was clapping. Since that day, I think a lot of people talk about speech, and I did speech drama theatre after that. But the only thing is that if there's one incident that shaped me in terms of being able to hold a mic and speak little bit of what I do,
was just 30 seconds about Rahul Dravid.
Was the 30 seconds about Rahul Dravid looking at a clock and saying that, A, B, C, D, X, Y, Z, which never actually came out of my mouth. Probably I was just blurting.
So do you remember any line, any word like which he said?
I really like Rahul Dravid because, and then there was something that I said, and I honestly, it didn't make any sense. I don't think anybody heard, and I don't think even the judge heard, but the fact that 300 people stood up for that, started clapping, and that the kid who was next to me also had to stand up and start clapping. I think that's something I took back home, saying, you know what,
I made 300 people stand and clap.
300 people stand and clap.
For something which I can never imagine myself doing, right? And that's something you take away.
Out of sheer compulsion. Let me be honest, on record, that was not even not even worth one clap.
No, I'm pretty sure you're just being modest, you're being humble at the moment, but...
No, I am not, and I'm very grateful to that teacher whose name is Mrs. Banerjee, who whispered it in the ear of the judge, because remember, as a kid growing up, when you don't have confidence about something, when somebody stands up and appreciates...
You really need validation from somebody else.
Yeah, and that when you get that validation, that's the time where you say that, I can do this. And of course, I think it took me forever after, and even yet I'm learning on an everyday basis as to how to speak. But at least now I can hold a conversation with you.
True.
In front of a camera. And
earlier it is not possible. No.
I could.
And this gets me to the point. Like even yesterday, I was speaking at the college I just told you about.
Yes.
So there was this point where I shared about this incident about the courage and how, like, it present scenario is how you're not. So we keep looking for validation,
right? And
we are not getting the validation in this social era. Like everybody's making fun of everyone, and this meme is really cool, right? So like whenever I'm trying to put something, so it just puts me to that point where I was talking about this thing. Like we as a responsible people of this generation, we should literally think about how we can appreciate more, like rather than just pulling our legs. Like I appreciate. Let's say I shared this example yesterday as well. Let's say I want to become a motivational speaker.
Correct.
Let's just say that. And I upload tomorrow, I just want to become a motivational speaker on YouTube.
Correct.
So tomorrow I record a video and then I upload it. So it's my first time. I've never sat in front of camera. I would be like, okay, I'm Raj Shamani and okay guys, do this, do that, whatever the motivational thing you say, like okay, time is running out, dream big, whatever. And I put it down. So I'm stammering, camera quality is bad, my voice modulation is not there, nothing's there. And everybody, this video, if I'm in school or college, would go viral and become a meme. Like, dekho, 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 isko kya karna cha raha hai, right? This would happen. But at the same time, if we, like today, what we need more people to come, to come to me and be like, okay, Raj, what you did was horrible. Like, let's be honest, like you were horrible, you need to improve a lot, but there was one thing which was a commendable, that's courage. Like you had the courage to go up in front of camera, and I think that requires a lot of efforts, and I don't have that. Like you have it, I don't have that. So why don't you keep continuing doing that more, but next time when you record a video, you can ask me and I can help you as an audience. So like friends can start doing that with other people.
Correct.
And that's how you can get the social validation,
of course.
And the courage will build up, the confidence will go up, and I think we need to appreciate more and then like be honest rather than just making fun of other people.
Absolutely.
So that's what the teacher did with you, I guess. Like if you're being that modest, I'm pretty sure like you're just being modest though.
No. Of course, trust me when I say that I could not speak, and trust me when I say that I could not legitimately, I could not hold my own in front of a class of 30 people, leave aside 300. So the idea is that human beings, I think, as a whole, seek validation in whatever they do, and to that end, especially when you are a teenager who's going through that phase of life,
we need a lot of social validation. True.
Yes, and then if there is somebody to just push you and say, like in your case, to push you and just say that yes, you can do it, you can make it happen.
Yeah.
Then I think then it just changes your worldview, your perspective towards so many things just suddenly changes, and it's a different ball game altogether.
Exactly, and that's where I think most of the people, I'm pretty sure you must have experienced this as well. That's where the people go wrong.
Correct.
Like everyone in our generation wants to become this influencer and want to have an impact, but in reality, they are not giving the validation or creating an impact in the person who's sitting right next to them. And it all starts with the person who's sitting right next to you. So, I'm taking this conversation to whole a different level, but the message I just want to put in is start creating an impact in the life of person who's right next to you.
Absolutely.
Like instead of thinking about going that crazy big, of course it's really good, and I think it's commendable to be ambitious. It's really necessary in life to go move ahead, but it all starts with someone who's sitting right next to you.
Absolutely, you summed it up, because if you can't make an impact on the person who's sitting next to you, then how will you start making an impact on somebody who's sitting in Syria or in China? But the idea is that one needs to not be an influencer, but be a person who, like you rightly said, is a person who's influencing the people in a positive way in and around him.
True.
And to that end, that is why I was more than happy to do this interview or this dialogue, in comparison to just be out there. And that's what people keep asking, saying, why don't you speak about what you do in different platforms? And I keep saying that the idea is rather to be in a Srinagar and impact people out there, in comparison to be in a television studio and to be doing a number of interviews.
Definitely. That's I can get your vision. I can get the vibes now. Now I'm getting in the suit of you. I can definitely get where you're trying to go and what you're trying to achieve, and it's something now I'm looking up to. Like I would just say this. Like it's. I don't say this to many people. I think this is the first time I'm saying it on camera out of all the like 17, 18 interviews which I've done till now, and like I'm really looking up to this kind of. Probably one day I'll have this kind of vision. I don't even think that big. I don't even think that big. And in order to start this action, you need to think first, right? You need to have that kind of vision. And you just gave me something to think about. I'm gonna have a few sleepless nights now. All thanks to you.
Well, very, very kind of you to say that. There are people who are visionaries and who've done much more in life. One thing is just having the vision. Second is the ability to execute it. And that is something that I'm not even halfway there.
And you're doing it. You are definitely. Just you should stop pretending to be like, not pretending, actually you are modest. You're not even pretending now. So I think you should stop being modest and at least own the thing which you're doing, and you are somebody who have done significantly good for himself, for the vision itself.
Thank you very much.
Now, so let's do the fun thing, right? It just cooked me. Please. So you were talking about 30 seconds about Rahul Dravid. Why don't you go now? And I just want to see. So there you go. We have.
If I speak about Rahul Dravid right now?
Yeah. So I don't want you to look at the clock and look at the camera. for 30 seconds. We have Rishabh Shah from IIMUN and the steel industry and the author and everyone, a visionary in front of us, talking about Rahul Dravid for 30 seconds. There you go.
Well, so love Rahul Dravid for numerous reasons, can't specify any one, but I think if there is a person who on and off the field is somebody who I can greatly respect and who I greatly regard, as much as for his on-field the wall nickname, as much as for his off-field manner of conducting himself, he's somebody who I look up to for the fact that he's so modest and humble. And the idea is that if we have such a role model for India as a whole, I'm just very grateful that I got exposed to Rahul Dravid growing up through cricket and then learned so much more about him. So I'm thrilled. I'm happy to be a Rahul Dravid fan, and I say all those who aren't should be one.
Now we're going to get your social validation. So I want everyone to comment on how this particular 30-second segment was.
I don't think it was very good, but yeah.
It was nice. I liked it. I like the authenticity in it, and I always go with the authenticity. Like you rightly said about how you got exposed, that you got exposed when you were quite young, and India needs this kind of role model because he's very modest, and I can surely see that he has impacted in your life. So yeah. Impacted you in your life.
Keep watching his videos. You keep hearing about it.
Did you meet him though?
No, so the good fortune of having met a few other people, but never had the fortune of meeting Rahul one-on-one like this. I would love to. I've heard him many a time. Would love to meet him, but I just think that hearing about him from the people who know him very well, and also being a part of a generation that grew up watching cricket in India, and especially Rahul playing, and then hearing about his off-field mannerisms is something that I think today, specifically in a generation which is growing up, unfortunately, to not necessarily the best role model, we definitely need somebody like Rahul Dravid, whose feet are yet so humbly on the ground that when I saw him at a queue at the Bangalore airport, and he was, again, and this is multiple such cases you've heard of him, but one which I may, if I can eat up a little bit of your camera time, is where he was standing just like everybody else in a long queue, and there were 10 people who crowded him and said, this Rahul Dravid. The security came. I said, no, I'm there, I'm good. And he just very humbly was standing with 2-3 security personnel who were more concerned about him in comparison to himself. And that, I think, speaks volumes of a man who once was the face of everything in India. So if you have somebody like that to look up to,
you definitely cannot go wrong. Let's just say that. If you are looking up to him, then you cannot go wrong.
And therefore, young people should choose role models very wisely.
True. Yeah. What is? So I would to ask this. Now you give me another question, but I'll ask this later. So one person two people who you have met in your life, like you said, you had a good fortune of meeting many people who you look up to. Like 2 people who you met and had a significant impact in your life, and after meeting them, they pushed your envelope of thinking to horizon. Like what were the 2 people? Who were the 2 people?
I think one person who I greatly admire and respect is Kumar Mangalam Birla. He is. No, I think that's for him. That sign is absolutely for him, because there's lots of respect for the guy. He is not just in terms of corporate India a legend, and I think people talk about people's work more than the person themselves, and I think for anybody who's choosing a role model, you should see not just their work. Of course, their work is what first got you exposed to, but the way that they lead their life after. And I think with Mr. Birla, not had the good fortune of meeting him many times, but a couple of times. And I remember this one instance, and it was a summit that I was attending. I was just a person who was attending the summit. Of course, the speakers included Mr. Birla amongst many others. I, at the end of that summit, had the courage, because I was no longer an introvert. This is as late as 2018, and I walked up to Mr. Birla and I said, I'm a huge fan, not because just of how you've created the $3 billion enterprise into a $45 billion enterprise today, the Aditya Birla group of companies, but more because of the fact of how you conduct yourself in public life. And then he looked at me and he said, okay, so tell me more. And And then tell me more about yourself. And then I spoke to him for about 15 to 20 minutes, and I am an absolute nobody to Mr. Birla in an August gathering of a lot of influential, well-known people. And he spoke to, I can equate myself to a kid in front of him for the longest for 15 to 20 minutes, and then took leave and then left. So if he had to choose 20 minutes to spend with people in that room, he could have picked anybody. And just the fact that he spoke to a nobody is something that made me realize, and that's one of the things that I look up to in a role model, is that how they are, not in terms of their achievements in life, but despite their achievements, how do they conduct themselves, not just in public life, but when I hear about Mr. Birla also, it's not just that he had to do that in front of me because there was a camera in front of him, but it's just that how he conducts and treats people just like that, so very humbly. And therefore that humility, or that and this is something that I see missing in so many young role models across the country, is that that humility is not there. And they've of course earned the right to be regarded.
They see the little spark of success and the humility is gone.
And I think Mr. Birla is one such person, and then one such incident where he spoke for 20 minutes and was absolute rubbish. I was talking rubbish as well. And just like this interview, it didn't make any sense. But the fact that he stood there and heard that rubbish for 15 minutes.
This is not rubbish. I would say, you're talking a lot of sense. You're putting a lot of sense in the people who are looking up to you. And I'm sure people who don't even look up to you are going to get exposed to you by this interview, and they will look up to you and they'll be like, okay, what this personality is, who you are.
I'm very, very glad. So Mr. Birla was one, and the second is Shamak Davar. I don't know whether
the choreographer, right?
Choreographer. Many people. So he's somebody whom I met in the first year of IIMUN, and I had incidentally was just sitting in a coffee shop. I walked up to him and I spoke to him, and it was at a popular club gathering, which was not your nightclubs, but a club which is where everybody was sitting. And I just walked up to him and I said, Shamak sir, huge fan, this is so and so, etc., etc. And the guy again had the decency to hear it. People can just shove you aside after 2 minutes and say, but he had he heard the entire thing for 10 minutes and what I was planning to do. And mind you, this is year one, so this is where nothing's actually happened in our when you see Shamak Davar's picture and you are Terence Lewis or you are a Remo D'Souza, you may want to come because you've seen Shamak Davar being there. But when there's no picture of anybody out there, and then to believe in someone and say that not because of your background or not because of anything, but because of the idea and the concept and the vision, I trust in you and I'll come for this. I think I'm very grateful to Shamak Davar, and he's played I've told him this 100 billion times now because I met him. I have had the good fortune of meeting him many times after. That he shaped my life, and I think IIMUN so much, because I think in year one, if there was no Shamak Davar, in year 3 there would be no somebody else, and in year 7 there would be not somebody else. And somebody had to take the first step of believing in an absolute nobody. And he did, and I think, and the way he conducts himself. So when you see a Shamak Davar, he's not your typical normal celebrity there are 100 people who are going to him for an autograph, but he's not the one who is pretending to be someone. He's, even at the end of a movie show, he will smile, stand, take a few pictures like everybody else, but at the same point in time, one of the things about him, he doesn't move around with security. He doesn't move around with, and this is the thing about Mr. Birla. No security. Rahul Dravid.
No security.
Single person walking just normally, no security. Shamak Davar, you find them normally and you'll be walking. And these are legends.
Yeah, these are the top of the games.
These are people who should be having 15 people in and around them to just take care of them.
True.
And that's when I look at these people and I say that, if these people don't need an entire entourage of 40 people, why do some of our politicians have 150 people in talking when there's not even one person who wants to go and meet that person? So long story cut short, I think if young India chooses, and just young people who are watching this video, if they choose role models wisely, and there might be nothing that might have come out of this talk, but if you choose your role model wisely, somebody that you look up to and want to be like, because you heard that in and around you, then I think you're in the right direction, because you look at them and then you say that I want to be like a Rahul Dravid, and then eventually I'll probably never get there, but you're 100th of that, and that's the way you want to conduct yourself. So then you keep talking about modesty, but all that I've seen Dravid do in any interview, and he's given 10 times bigger than these interviews, is, and not just interviews but generally, is how he conducts himself, and I think that's what defines a human being.
Wow.
So
yeah, that's like this little thing like which he's talked about for 5 minutes, I guess. So this taught me 3 things which I want to sum up into. Number 1 is modesty is the game. Like how authentic you are, how modest you are about your work, and it's just not about modest, it's about how authentic and real you are. Correct. In your real world, in the business world, in whatever you are doing, and it really inspires people. So there are a lot of people who say like, okay, now that I have this aura, now that I'm successful, now that I'm rich, I need to follow certain protocol, I need to go understand. I think it's absolutely bullshit. I'm just putting it at there. And I think it's absolutely bullshit, because if you're talking about Mr. Birla, if you're talking about Rahul Dravid, if you're talking about Shamak Dawar, and they don't have this kind of protocol, and they are living just the way they would live at their homes, with their friends, they're like that with everyone else. In fact, you have, at some level, you're living your life as the complete utmost honesty and authenticity. So I think anyone needs to think about like this, like they need a certain protocol to be in, because I've met so many people who have the wrong idea of how they should live their lives after they get the little success.
Yeah, little success and little fame, and when somebody said this in Harry Potter, I think fame is a fickle friend.
Yeah.
So, and fame, success, money,
they're all fickle friends. Yeah.
Things are going to come and go. How you conduct yourself today is what you're going to be known by.
True. Forever.
Forever. And to that end, that's what people should realize, that off camera and on camera, and that's what you want to be. You want to be the same authentic person that you
Exactly. That's where you get the respect, and I think it's way more important than anything else which we talked about. Respect is the...
And you influence so many young people with your videos, and that, therefore, a message for all the people who watch your videos and your podcasts and so on and so forth, is that when they're like, because growing up in a generation which is now predominantly, like I said, 600 million below 25 and young people across the world, I think if young people just select, because and I greatly admire this one girl called Aditi Rao Hydre, who I just met, and I'll sum it up like that: in a world full of Kardashians, it's better to be an Audrey. I'd say in a world full of not Kardashians, but in a world full of people who are different off camera, it's better to be the same off and on camera. And to that end, selecting the right role model is the first.
Yeah, so I was coming up to the other 2 things, 3 things which I said. One was the authenticity. Second was, I think when people say that it's better to have a vision than the actual results in the start, because in the start you don't have anything concrete to show to people, but it's the vision where people buy into you. So I think when you are when you want to do something, when you're in the process of doing something, getting people to buy your vision is the most important thing. Because if your vision wasn't strong, if your idea wasn't clear, the Shamak Dawar and many people like him wouldn't be there with you, buying in you, because who would want to buy, who would want to come in a conference who some inexperienced teenager is doing back then? I'm pretty sure you must have faced this. So yeah, the vision is really important. So if you have this concrete vision, I think you can get along the world with you, and you can start a movement just like he did. And number 3, the most important thing, which I'm a big believer of, I've said this in many speeches, and I could see myself in you when you were talking about this, having a role model. So I think, I read about role models and everything when I was reading an interview by Azim Premji. I admire him a lot. And he said, the most important thing for success is to have the right role model. He said, you don't need the right education, you don't need the right resources, you need the right role model.
Absolutely.
And if you have that hunger, and I said this in multiple times, and I think you would believe and validate this sentence, if you know who you admire, and if you have the hunger to become like them, I think you're on the right track.
Absolutely.
So having the role model is the most important thing when you want to become or achieve anything in life. And having the right one, as he rightly said, is also important.
Very, very important.
Very important.
Very important. Especially in the day and age that we live, where everyone's looking for instant gratification via Instagram and so
The microwave generation, yeah.
the microwave generation. And in such a generation, to find the right person to look up to is quintessential. And to that end, I just hope that the likes of, you're taking this interview, and I'm happy to do, which I was happy to do. The reason why is that people who are not that all in your face, and I would quote cricket because I'm a great cricket buff, is like a Chetesh Pujara. And nobody would want to take an interview of a Cheteshwar Pujara. Everyone will take an interview of the more famous, more celebrated cricketers. You'd hardly see an Ajinkya Rahane doing an interview with a CNN.
Yeah.
That's never happened. So, but it was much like in the generation of Rahul Dravid, but you had multiple such Rahul Dravids, and we were lucky to have a Sachin and so on and so forth. But today's generation is unfortunately not getting exposed to your Chetesh Pujara, Ajinkya Rahane, equivalent across different fields.
True.
All that we are getting exposed to is a more in-your-face role models.
Makes sense.
And to that end, I don't need to say much more than I won't make a controversial statement because I should not.
I completely get it, yeah.
But you're getting what I'm trying to say.
True.
That the more in-your-face role models are not necessarily the ones that should be your role models. And to that end, like I keep quoting Aditi's Instagram bio now, in a world full of Kardashians, you should be an Audrey. So that's
Lovely. So I just have two last questions for you. One is the personal question which I really wanted to ask you. Like, I'm a big fan of this man Shashi Tharoor. I recently saw that you happened to meet him and you had this good opportunity, and I think like you're good friends with him, I guess, now. And that's something, like, first is, just tell me one sentence, like, how was it? How was it? Like, just in one sentence, and then the question follows.
Well, it was, what's that big word? Supercalifragilistic. What is it?
I don't know. But yeah, I know what you're talking about.
So choose the biggest word that defines the fact that he is one of the most intellectual people that you'll ever come across. And to that end, I think it's very enamoring for me, you, young India, and especially somebody who wants to do something in international relations or spread the message of world peace. I think Dr. Tharoor is a living legend.
Yeah, that's like when I was looking up, when I was trying to find more details about you, what you do, about your work, and I was inspired by you, what you're doing, how you're trying to create an impact and everything. But there was one point where I wasn't inspired, I didn't feel enlightened, I felt jealous. I saw this picture, you're sitting in like this AB Celestial, I guess, yeah?
Correct.
Yeah, you there with Shashi Tharoor, I'm like, oh my God, no. I was jealous at that moment, I was like, no, I need to know. So the question was this, like, how do you meet these people? Because there are many people who have their vision, who want to do visionary things, and you need more people to buy into your vision, of course. But how do you reach out to these people? How do you meet these people?
Well, just normally,
because you talked about the governor, you talked about Vikas Khanna, you talked about Shashi Tharoor, then I happened to see you were in President, right? You were there you were there with Pranab Mukherjee. You got Namo Live. You got like so many things. You have been with all the anomalies which this country looks up to. So how do you reach out to these people?
I think reaching out to people just generally is a process that I think is too overcomplicated. It's something where you have to, it's as little as dropping and people would not believe me when I would say it, but I'm reiterating it and be happy to show you. But where is just a normal email communication or a normal email that's gone out to the person, and honestly, if it's a well-written email, I don't think people don't not respond. And to that end, just simply picking up the phone, checking with them or their offices or whatever it is something that would get you there. So I think it's just too overcomplicated, the entire thing of reaching out, networking and communication.
It's pretty simple. Just reach out through email or wherever you can get. Just like the way I did to you, like DMs, right?
Yeah, you DM'd me and you asked me saying, let's do this, and I said, fantastic, and that's how we met, and that's how we connected. And I think in the age of, we're so lucky as millennials to live in a generation in which, you got a Twitter, you got an Instagram, you got a Facebook, and we can connect with each other much faster
True.
than what other people did. And so if you drop an Insta message to some of these people, I'm pretty sure somebody would respond.
Definitely. So again, I talk a lot about this. Like you say so many things which I usually believe in my life, and I usually follow. Like, let's just say, like, I've experimented a lot and follow these things. So what I do, let's say if I want to reach out to you, and let's say any anomaly, so I would try to reach out to that person with, let's say, Facebook, Instagram, email, everywhere possible. If you don't reply, then I reach out to the second person, like who's the closest to you. I'll try to find out, let's say you have this organization, IIMUN. I would go to the website, I'll find out like who are the people responsible, who are the management team. I'll try to reach out to them. And then if they don't reply, I'll reach out to the third person, then the fourth person, then the fifth person. And then if nothing works, then I'll go to the local IIMUN conference in my city, reach out to that person, and then they will help me connect with you.
Sure.
Right, so this communication, this entire networking thing happens like this for me. Like
That's very
try to break it down.
I learned something new. So I'm glad. But
no, you have already reached like places, so you don't. I need to learn a lot from you now.
No, I'm very glad. There's a very structured method of reaching out to people, and I think I will try that. I will attempt that
because it worked. It worked for me. Like it made me reach. So I haven't reached people like you have, but I've reached a couple of people. Like I've reached Tony Robbins. I've reached Richard Branson. Like he was the biggest thing I could ever imagine in my life. Like watching. So I'll share this experience on camera. I've never shared this. I had like 5 minutes with Richard Branson along with 20 people.
How nice.
Okay. How did that 5 minutes go? So the guy walks in front of me and I'm like this. Hi, it just stopped there. He shook me, like we shook our hands and he walked away because I couldn't utter a word. And I lost my 5 minutes. But that gave me so much enlightenment about how you're like, this elevator talk.
Correct.
Like that's where I realized the importance of elevator talk because I went blank.
Correct.
Like I thought, I did so many things just to reach out to that man. And when I was finally there, and of course, he's the kind of person who would not give you more than 5 minutes. Even the 5 minutes with him is like a lot.
Of course.
So, yeah, and that's how I reached out to Gary Vaynerchuk, like he's one of my biggest role models. Michael Phelps, like it all happened through layers, like all layers.
But all the international celebrities who are, like you have a very structured approach, and like I said, I'm very glad, and I'm pretty sure that you're already doing phenomenal work, and you're set out to do even more.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So, what's the one message you would want to give everyone who's watching this? What's like one message in your life? You started at 19, you're pretty young, you are an author, you are an international celebrity, people look up to you as a motivational speaker, you have done phenomenally good with your organization, and you happen to help your family in their business as well, which is a lot to do.
Thank you. It's very, very kind of you to just put my entire bio there. But the one message that I'd love to give anybody who's watching this video, this podcast, is that, irrespective of whatever you do in life, I think it's very important, like we discussed in this entire 45 minutes, is to make sure that you have one person that you look up to and want to be like. And to that end, to find the right role model, and it could be any field across any discipline, try to find one person that you can emulate and want to be more like. I think not just because of the things they do in their work, but also because of the people that they are outside of their work. And if you find somebody like that who is humble, true and authentic, then I think half the task is done, because then you would wanting to emulate them and get there. It's not really important whether you meet these people or you don't meet them. The important thing is that you are looking up to them and want to be like them. I've not yet met Rahul Dravid, and it's yet someone that I greatly respect and regard. This is what I would want to pass on.
Lovely, that's amazing. So in the end, I usually end up with on a lighter note. So the lighter note would be, I would have this rapid fire kind of thing. I'll ask you 4 questions.
Please.
Like 4 or 5, I'll just randomly pop up.
Please.
And before the rapid fire round, there's a segment which we call it question of the day.
Right.
And the question of the day is, you get to ask me. So whatever you want to ask me, or you want to ask the audience, like you could ask whatever you want to, and then I'm going to answer you.
Perfect. So I'm going to ask you one question, which actually is always, what, according to you, what do you think is a more powerful way of communicating with people? You've answered it partly earlier, but would you prefer a an approach where you talk to 1,000 people directly, or would you prefer an approach where you have 1,000 followers on Twitter and then you would reach out to them via
I think
text?
it depends on the message, the kind of message you want to share, because different message needs different kind of platform, the different kind of mediums. Because like there are certain kind of messages where you want to have where you want to give people an experience. Because let's just say we talk about mental health, I think it's a very one-on-one personal kind of message where you need to give people an experience so that they can overcome that particular state where they are in. And when it comes to general message where you want to inculcate so many people together into one movement, then you need a wider approach, and then the people, places like Twitter and then Instagram, and they follow up. So it all depends on the kind of message you want to share. Sometimes I really, really believe in this thing that you need to give people an experience so that they can they can break through their particular state. And that experience comes only when you're addressing directly to the person or to the 1,000 people. And when it's about the movement, when you want to rise in emotion, then there's this social media comes in the game. Like that's what I think. So the mixture of both is really important. It all depends on the kind of message you want to share.
So offline and online both are
equally important, because it all depends on the kind of message you want to share.
Of course. Very rightly put. Very, very rightly put.
Because you just cannot make somebody get out of his mental health just by. I'm pretty sure there are people, but like if somebody is going through chronic depression or something, you just cannot put a simple quote and then hope that like they'll change their life and they'll break through that state. But you can ignite one quote and get this nation into start one movement, Nirbhaya, like, or anything for that sort.
Very true. Very true.
So, yeah, that's it. Like that's what I wanted to say. And this question is, I think everyone watching this interview or watching this conversation should answer. What do you think is more important in today's era? Do you think the online conversation is more important or the offline conversation? This is a really nice question. Because the way we are leading our lives and the way this world is going, I think this question needs to get answered many times and at many different platforms.
Very true. Very, very true.
So the rapid fire thing.
Shoot, please.
Who is Rishabh Shah?
A tempter.
What motivates you to wake up every day?
Breakfast.
What's the one thing you would never want to do in private or public?
Set a bad example.
But if you want to choose another cricketer in today's generation, today's India team, apart from Rahul Dravid, which is not there, who would it be? Who would you look up to?
Ajinkya Rahane and Cheteshwar Pujara are two people that I greatly admire.
The politician you want to become like?
I would take the hard work of Prime Minister Modi and probably the intellect of Dr. Tharoor and mix both.
What would you rather prefer, going back to that place where you got to the debate competition where you were humiliated by people and you walked out of the place, or you want to dance in front of 10,000 people?
So I'd prefer going back to the episode where I got humiliated in front of the students for public speech.
Guys, this is Rishabh Shah, the man himself, the admiring person, and like I admire him so much. Before this interview, he was just a person who I would think of as an influential personality who has done good for himself, but now I really admire his work and his vision, because it takes a lot to have this kind of vision and actually take an action to try to achieve that ambition which you have. And I'm pretty sure you're going to achieve that soon. All my regards to you.
Thank you.
And the question is now, when can we collaborate now? Again, I'm looking forward to it. Thank you everyone. This is Voices. I see you soon again with another personality. I don't know who's gonna beat the charming personality like Rishabh, but definitely we're gonna have another guest who will have an impact in your lives again. Thank you so much.